Speaking of someone who should have been term limited a long time ago, Senator James Inhofe, a known climate denier, went on CNN the other day, okay? And he was on there to talk about how he is expected to chair the Senate Environmental Panel, which is just out of a horror story, if you can even imagine that. We're not going to focus on that today, though. And he is insisting that climate change is not definitive. So let me set the stage for you here. I'm going to play the clip of James Inhofe explaining why he doesn't think climate change is definitive. But what I want you to focus on here is what isn't being said. And if you don't know what isn't being said here, I'll tell you after the clip. Let's watch, let's listen first.
There's a scientific consensus, overwhelming, that climate change is real, that it at least partly man-made, that some action must be taken. Now, you've called it a conspiracy. What are you talking about?
No, I'm just saying that when you say that science is settled and the overwhelming scientific analysis comes to that conclusion, Frank, that is just not correct. I can remember back in about 2002 or 2003, when I first started finding out from scientists that the science is not there, and then all of a sudden it started rolling in, and I published in the Congressional Record not hundreds, but thousands of scientists who disagree with the United Nations. Keep in mind.
Okay, so James Inhofe is just wrong, Lewis. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that there is climate change happening and that human activities on Earth are at least partly responsible for the changes that are being observed. I started doing some research and said, well, this James Inhofe, I remember hearing more about him and his relationship to climate change. And I started doing some research, and it turns out that part of the reason he doesn't think climate change isn't going on isn't actually because there isn't a scientific consensus. It's because he believes that humans don't have the ability to affect the climate on any broad basis because God would never have created a situation where that would be possible. That's right. Inhofe is one of these guys who says climate change, God wouldn't set up a situation for us where we could truly affect the climate of our planet. I also researched further in terms of the flow of money, and it turns out that during his 25-year tenure in the Congress, Inhofe has received over $1.5 million in contributions from the oil and gas industries, by far his largest donor. So listen, I don't criticize CNN for having this guy on. I'm all about exposing corrupt, fraudulent, and uninformed extremist views. Anyone who pays attention to this program knows that. But it is irresponsible for CNN not to say directly, my guest believes that God has set up our planet so that we can't affect the climate. That informs his opinion. My guest has received $1.6 million in funding from companies that would lose money if regulations were made more strict around climate change and around pollution. It's irresponsible, Lewis, for CNN and other corporate media to not make that completely explicit during these interviews.
Just about everything they do is irresponsible. When was the last time you heard tough questions being asked on CNN? Or CNN bringing up points like this about people they might be talking to? It just doesn't happen.
And it should be happening. And this is, there's some good stuff on corporate media sometimes. There's some well-done programs, but these are just the obvious questions. If you have someone on who has such a view that is completely disconnected from the empirical scientific realities of modern society, and or maybe they didn't even research, but the information is there, God wouldn't allow climate change, 1.6 million from companies that have a vested interest in him holding that opinion. It's just absolutely shameful not to mention it. And this is unfortunately what we've come to expect from CNN and from this same type of corporate media. We have a great program for you today. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/dpakman.